Why do you have a seat? Tell me what appears to be the problem. I have for you 4 questions, and I feel that I've kind of addressed one in the past, but anyway. First question: do you plan on having others on your channel anytime soon? Not really. It sometimes comes up and sometimes it doesn't. I have no concrete plans. I know that people like specific collaboration videos and that I do not like other collaboration videos. There's no immediate plans. So this is a matter of it happens when it happens, and it may not happen or it may. So that's really the most sensible and slightly tragic answer I can give you. I just don't know. Okay, next question. How much and what do you write with your pens? I'd like to write more, but I'm not really the I'm not really the journaling type, and at work I'm really confined to computers, etc. That's a problem. But I find that at work I use pens. I use them to take notes. I'm a college professor, so I do teaching, right, for a living, and that means that I read stuff and then I take notes, or sometimes I attend someone else's lecture and I take notes, or I go to meetings and I take notes, and I do all that by hand. Is that ideal? Not always. Sometimes digital would be easier, but I still like it, and that means that I do actually use my pens. I think I can really say, just talking about work days, not a day goes by where I don't write down something by hand. So that to me is great because I like writing by hand. Journaling is a good option. It does help to, allow you to use your pens. But journaling is also not really my thing. So this is a question that I would like to open up to the audience. If you have ideas on what to do with pens, please leave the ideas below. For now, I will say sometimes it's as simple as you write a grocery list with a pen. I know it's not exciting, but to me the most exciting thing probably is, and it's something that I have less and less time for, but write people a letter. Write friends or parents or loved ones, whatever, write them a letter or a note. It's incredibly appreciated, and that really is a way to express yourself, and use your pens. You can match the ink to the specific person you're writing to, all those sorts of things. I have found that is a really nice way to use pens, and that a way that is not just nice for you, but that other people typically really appreciate as well. So that's probably what I would recommend. And again, if other people have any other ideas, thoughts, or suggestions, then by all means, let me know in the comments. Okay. Sorry, just writing down timestamps. Which pens tend to be dry writers in your experience? That's a very broad question that I'm not sure I can answer. I found that many pens these days use either Jowo or B.R.E nibs. If the nibs are not made in-house by that pen company, as they are, for example, for Aurora, often, very good chance, it's a B.R.E or a Jowo, because there only are a few nib manufacturers in the world. I have found that of these two, Jowo and B.R.E, B.R.E is typically the drier of the two. That's really it. If you really want to get technical, you can often tell the tighter the slit in the nib is, the drier the pen is. And typically, the finer the nib, the drier it tends to be, relatively speaking. An extra fine typically will be drier than a double broad nib. Although, if that double broad nib has a very tight slit, it will not be wet and it will not write very wetly. So you really look at the geometry of the nib slit, to really tell you something about whether it's a dry white writer or a wet writer. The wider that slit is, the wetter it tends to be, until it starts to splay the wrong way and the two tines point in different directions, in which case the pen starts to get very dry and skip and does not write properly. So that's it. I wouldn't say, oh, Aurora is dry or whatever. I just don't think you can make that statement about an entire brand, unless, as I just said, that brand uses one particular nib type, and then often, again, out of the B.R.E and Jowo nibs, I find the B.R.E nibs to be the drier of the two. But they're also a pretty wet B.R.E nib, so it's no easy generalization. I really can't say anything about this beyond that. Okay, the final question for today, I wanted to allot some time for because I think this is one that a lot of people can relate to. I'm trying to reduce the number of pens that I own. I've done pretty well. I've narrowed it down to a certain number, but now I've come to the point where I have an emotional connection to what I have left. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how to overcome that? That's a really, really provocative question, I think. Fountain pens are, by their nature, very personal tools. And for me, they fall into the same category as, say, something like wristwatches or something. I'm not really a watch person, but it's a very personal item because you select it, you connect with it, you use it on a daily or semi-daily, whatever, like on a regular basis, and as a result, you feel more connected to it, and that's interesting. Uh, it's certain objects that do that. Imagine you were to buy a pair of socks. I'm not talking about a $2 pair of socks. I'm talking about, let's say you buy really fancy socks. You might really like those socks, but I don't think you'll ever have the emotional connection to those socks that you would have to a fountain pen or something like that, a luxury object like that. And when I say luxury object, it doesn't mean it has to be expensive. It can be a very nice $5 fountain pen, right? They do exist. The point I'm trying to make is, yes, emotional connections to these kinds of objects are real. And I know exactly what you mean. I have sold a lot of pens over the years from my personal collection. And you do get to a point where what you start to sell is pens that you feel you have an emotional connection to, either because they were a gift from someone that you appreciate, or because you bought them at a specific time in your life, or whatever, you wanted to commemorate a certain thing in your life. Anything along those lines can be a reason for you to feel that emotional connection. The simplest answer, but that's not a very helpful answer, but I do think it's good sometimes for people to hear that, is you don't have to sell a pen. If you feel that you really have a strong emotional connection to that pen, you could just choose to keep it. And then as a result, you don't lose that connection. But like I said, if you're really trying to narrow your pens down to a certain number of pens, that may not be very helpful to you. So let me try to give you a more usable answer. I have found that sorry, I'm not getting emotional. I was just thinking about how to word that. I have found that I have sold pens over the years that I had a quote unquote emotional connection to. And I thought it would be difficult to sell them. And in some cases, it also was difficult to sell them. But I've also found that almost never did I regret selling those pens. Now, I'm going to give you a very low level, not super emotional example. I distinctly remember September 2011, I attended a very nice conference. It had nothing to do with pens, it was a professional conference on Mallorca, Spanish island. And on the last night in my hotel room, I purchased a Faber-Castell Emotion pen with a broad nib. I reviewed it. Go back on my channel. Years. This is over a decade ago, right? So go back and you'll find it. I love that pen. And for the longest time, I didn't want to sell it. I didn't use it a whole lot. I didn't want to sell it because I had that emotional connection. Now, as emotional connections go, this is one of the weakest links you could possibly have, right? But I had that. It was a nice conference. I had a lot of fun there. The weather was lovely. It was beautiful. And I had that pen. And I kind of associated it with that conference. Now, of course, you can have, like I said, way more personal connections with a pen. I ended up selling it. And guess what? Didn't regret it. Not regretted it. Sometimes I long for that pen, not because of that connection, but because it was such a nice writer. But that's different. I have sold other pens that were gifts from people that I love, and it was hard to sell them because they were gifts. And then guess what? ended up not regretting it. If you hardly ever use a pen, in my mind, there's no reason to keep it. And it takes practice to get to that stage where you're like, you know what, this was a nice pen. Yes, it was a nice gift. He, she, they, whatever they gave it to me. You know what, I'd never use it. Sell it. And again, 9 out of 10 times, maybe more than that, 9.5, 9.9 out of 10 times, I did not regret selling that pen. And if you really end up regretting it, well, you can always have a chat with the person who bought it. But again, by far most of the time, it sounds difficult in your mind, but when you do it, it may hurt for a day or two. But after that, life goes on, and it's not a big deal, and everything just continues. So I really wouldn't have that feeling of I shouldn't, should I? No, just do it. Give it a shot with the pen you have the weakest emotional connection to, and then see how you end up not missing it. I pretty much promise you that's what's going to happen. You end up not missing it. Everything is fine. That's what I would do. Remember, at the end of the day, you may lose that specific pen, but you still have the memory. And I find that a very comforting thought, literally, as well. Imagine you would have a nice pen that was a gift from your mother, and you lose it one day. Well, then you don't even know what happens to it, and that might make you sad. But if you take that same pen, you end up selling it because you don't use it anymore, you don't want it anymore. At least you know it went to a nice home, someone who really wanted that pen. And I find that almost easier to process than having lost something like that. So that I find helps as well. Think of it in terms of, but you know what? It's okay. It's gone to a nice home. And I still have a couple pens that I sold. It's not so much that I miss them because of the emotional connection, but they were very nice writers. And sometimes I still message people. My brother Kyle is one of those people. Of, hey, do you remember that Paragon? How does that write now? And then typically I get a picture like, oh, don't worry, the Paragon's doing well. And that's how it works. It's okay. It's okay. And if you do it once or twice, after that, you don't even blink anymore, and you can sell all that stuff. So don't be discouraged. It sounds harder than it really is. And you will always have that memory, and that's what matters most. Not the object, because the object could be destroyed too, but the memory, and that won't disappear. So, I hope that's useful. I hope that gave you something to think about. Let me know how you feel about selling emotional pens, and I'll see you soon. If you have any other questions, please leave them below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Bye.